Hello, and welcome to another episode of Key.io Bite-Sized Bits, where we're serving up bite-sized ideas to help you unlock your true potential. Today, we're talking about some practical thoughts on how to start meditating and why one would want to start meditating in the first place. And my name is Luke Summerfield. You can see, for those of you watching the YouTube video behind me, I'm coming to you live from Harvard Yard in Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA, just down the road from where I live here in the States. So I want to start off by first talking about why would one want to meditate. And I think there's a few different ways that you can approach this question. It depends on what you're trying to get out of it. The frame of reference that I'm going to talk about this in is the idea of how do we, in this world of technology, in this world of stressful job situations, as we're trying to be high performer within work and within family and all these things, how do we take this idea of meditation and use it as a way to mentally train ourselves? Just like we go to the gym and we physically train ourselves to become better from a physical standpoint, how do we mentally train ourselves? And so that's the context that I'm going to talk about. How do we mentally train ourselves to then apply that into better performance mentally in other areas of our life? So there's this idea of having, if we think about why we want to meditate, there's this idea of having essentially within your brain, you have two voices, right? You have two perspectives. You have their perspective of, okay, here's what I'm observing in this world, and here's kind of the high level what I'm seeing. And then you have the other is like, okay, well, what's my reaction to that? How do I go out and talk to that? So you can kind of think of it as on one side you have your stimulus, and on the other side you have your response. And I think very much that the stimulus side of the brain is kind of the monkey brain. That's the side of the brain that sees something and has this immediate reaction to it. And on the other side, we have kind of our reflection, this response side to, okay, well, how do we take that and respond to it? And very much for many of you, myself included, before starting meditation, I started about 2 years ago, meditating 20 minutes every morning. Those two things were very inseparable. They were very together, and it was really only one. So you'd have this stimulus that came in, this problem. Your boss sent you an email, your coworker said something to you, your husband or wife or your significant other said something, and this stimulus comes in, and immediately you have this response without really processing that information. And the interesting thing is, so this comes from Viktor Frankl's book. I forget the exact name of it. I'll put it in the show notes. It's a man's search for meaning in life or something like that. He talks about that the beauty that we have as humans is that we can actually separate those two moments. And between those two moments, from your stimulus to response, that area in between is where we can determine our outcome. We can determine that response. And that's what sets us apart from animals. That's what sets us apart from many different people. And I see that the way I look at it is that meditation and being mindful of your thoughts is a way for you to expand that window between the stimulus and the response so that you can better determine what is the response that I should give, what is the way that I should interpret that and perform. And so that's a very high-level answer. Of course, you can take that concept and apply it to many different ways. I've noticed in my own personal life that meditation, opening that window up where I have that stimulus and response, has allowed me to better adapt and better deal with stressful situations. It'll help me with areas where I need to be mindful of what's going on in my life. If I'm trying to grow in a certain situation, I can be mindful and cognizant of when I'm settling, when I'm stagnating, when I'm not growing anymore, because I can interpret those ways of thinking. Now, there's a bunch of other reasons on why you would do it. Again, I think just that idea of stimulus and response and meditation allowing you to open that up and be more cognizant of your thoughts so that you can have a better idea of how to respond to it. Again, that can be applied to many, many, many different things. So the question then becomes, I hear this a lot, and I struggled with it myself, is how do you get started with meditation? Even if you're not into the kind of woo-woo light beams and chakras and all that stuff around that, which I think is cool. I'm into that to some degree. But even if you're looking for just the practical, I want to start implementing this in my life to have that practical application. How do I get started with it? Well, when I first started, as many of you who are maybe watching this, you struggle with taking this and taking into practice, and all of a sudden you think like, okay, well, I have to get into a strict routine of 20 minutes every morning, 20 minutes every night, or I have to do these long, hour-long, or even weekend retreats or things like that in order to truly get the benefit from meditating. But here's the formula that worked really well for me, and I think you can take these, take some golden nuggets out of here and find a formula that'll help you get started with it. So after failing trying to get started meditating by doing these long half-hour stints of trying to meditate, I decided to break it down and go into bite-sized chunks. And so what I did was I started by finding a song. We have this idea that you need to be completely silent. There can't be anything, any sound. You just have to be you and your mind, and you have to be kind of sitting there upright and all of that. And all of that is true. That's where we want to get to. But to jump right into it and go to that level is hard. So what I did was I found a 3 to 5 minute song that when I listened to that song, it was very calming. It allowed me to kind of pull myself out of my day-to-day, get into almost like a trance-like state where it calms me and kind of elicits certain emotions in my brain that's very calming and relaxing and reflective. And so I found a song. For my case, it was ambient noise. There was no vocals. There was no drums or anything like that. It was kind of smooth ambient noise. For you, who knows? Maybe it is AC/DC, or maybe it's something totally different. So you need to pick what type of song elicits those emotions in your brain. And then all you do is honestly, you could sit in a chair. When I started, I sat up against a wall. I sat in my bed up against a wall. You could sit in a chair. You could go right to just free sitting. I noticed for me personally, without putting my back against the wall, I ran into a lot of my back was just started to ache about 2 minutes in, and that's all I could think about. Which that in and of itself is a good mental exercise on how to recenter your thoughts as you get into that. But when you're first starting out, you don't want to jump right into that. So I started with that, and I just sat. Was very calm. You could start by listening to the song, but then also pulling it back into your own breathing. And so when you think about the air coming through your nose and being inhaled and exhaled through your nose, I really focused on that point of the air going in and out. And anytime your mind starts wandering, you start thinking about things, like we immediately say, oh, that's bad, you shouldn't do that, your mind should be clear. But the reality is when you start, like that's going to happen, and that's okay. But what the goal is to notice when it happens, notice when your mind is wandering, notice when you're thinking about things of the day, and then be able to say, okay, this is what I'm thinking of, that's okay, let's put that in my back pocket, we'll think about it later, and let's just pull this back in and start focusing on your breathing. That's really where the key is when you first start out, is not necessarily completely going that whole time without thinking of other things. It's being noticing and being mindful of when your mind is thinking of those things and how do you pull it back. That's the key. And that's the great skill that later down the road you can start separating that stimulus with response, because you can start seeing how your mind's thinking before you respond. So that's how I started, with just a 4-minute song, and after a while, once I got comfortable with that, I could get through the whole song, my mind was feeling pretty good, then I added another song to the playlist, and now I had 2 songs, then I had 3 songs, and it was maybe a month with 1 song, then a month with 2 songs, a month with 3 songs, and 4 months in, I'm up to 20 minutes worth of songs. And that was a really great way for me to slowly progress to that. Now, the next step is, once you get to that point, now what I did was I started decreasing the volume of the songs. So I started with just kind of normal background noise, and I slowly made it quieter and quieter and quieter, so that over time, it was barely even noticeable, if at all. And once I got through that, then I was at a point where I could sit without the songs. And now it's just me and my thoughts. And again, even to this day, 2 years later, my mind wanders all the time, and that's totally okay. I just need to be cognizant and aware of when it wanders, and to pull it back in to where into my breathing and into being mindful when my thoughts are wandering. Now, here's one other last little thing that I want to throw out here, and then we'll wrap it up for today. I think, again, we start off with the idea that the whole goal of when you do meditation properly, it's supposed to be quiet, it's supposed to be very zen, you're supposed to be just you and your thoughts. And I think that's a good place to work towards when you first start, but that's not the end goal. So what I mean by that is, when we think of when we first start, we go through that activity that I just talked about. You go through that, going through and adding songs to it, even if it's not completely silent. Your back's up against the wall. It's not kind of what you would, I guess, ideally think of for meditation. But you eventually get to the point where you can wean yourself off of that and get to a point where you're sitting in silence. It's just you and your thoughts, and you try and be very mindful. Now, the end goal, though, is to be able to take that type of response, take that type of mental thinking, and to be able to apply that in any situation. And that's the key. So true people, in my opinion, and from my experience, people who are true masters at this are able to be in immense crazy situations. They just found out that they defaulted on their loan. They're in this crazy storm, and they have to figure out what they need to do. They are battling with all kinds of different external factors, and with all this chaos, all this noise, all these things coming at them, they're able to stay centered on their thoughts, pull back their mind, stay calm, and be able to determine, okay, how can I process these things that are coming in and to have a good outcome? And so I think that's the ultimate goal, is to take that, to work over time, to be able to take that training that you're doing in isolation, without those variables, without all that craziness in that, but be able to eventually work your way into being very, very, still be mindful in those crazy situations. And so that's kind of the next step, is once you get comfortable with being mindful in those quiet zones, is to start going out into some of those more chaotic areas in life, in construction zones, go for a walk, do those types of things, and still be very cognizant of your mind and being able to pull things back in and interpret it. So that's what I have for you today. Hopefully you enjoyed. It's some practical tips on how to get started with meditation, and why you would want to do that. If you did find this helpful and you have other people that you think would, feel free, please share it with friends, colleagues, family members that may be interested in it. Make sure you subscribe both to our YouTube channel if you prefer video, and our podcast if you prefer that format for while you're commuting to work. And check out key.io, key with two Y's, KEYY.io, for additional tools, resources, and trainings on how to help you hit your peak performance and true potential. Thank you. Talk soon.